Segment 2, Northtown Neighborhood News Magazine, a presentation of Sonny Hirsch and myself. You can catch all our shows on the web, 331,000 watch, thank you very much, at www.ntnm.org, communitypolicingcaps24.org, and, if you've gotten some strange emails from me lately, and I know a lot of you have, I have been hacked. And if you wonder why you don't get my weekly TV show thing anymore, because of the hacked mails, I have been declared a spam site by places like Gmail and Yahoo. So I'm going to have to start from scratch with that whole list. I've got the names. I just, need to get rid of my present mailbox, and which is a shame because I really like them. They had some great security features that don't seem to be working now. And yeah, I changed the email, the virus program, the whole shot, and nothing. So yeah, somebody told me that they got 30 from me yesterday.
I only got one.
One is one too many.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the program, just real quick, is that when I take a look at the list of things I get back, it's like anybody who was ever in my address book. There's a guy who used to be one of my best friends who turned on me, who, and not who you think, Jim. He got one too. He hasn't been in that address book for over a dozen years. And it would seem all these people, and people I've got on my block list got emails. So, boy, some of these programs are really pretty effective. The hacking programs, unfortunately. So we're going to resume them again. In the meantime, your best bet is to friend me on Facebook because I am putting everything out over there. I haven't been doing the flyer without the emails, but after Passover, I'm going to start doing the flyers again. It is a pleasure. We haven't really had anybody come to talk about the judicial elections yet, even though the election is over and then some, but it's a little more interesting this year than most, and I'll let him explain in part to you why. We want to also congratulate him on his 4th granddaughter, and that is the author of the best judicial blog in the area, the only judicial blog in the area, for what it's worth, and Jack Leyhane. How you doing?
Avi, thanks for having me again, and thank you for acknowledging my new granddaughter. That's wonderful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yes, the election is over, and unfortunately, a lot of voters are going to wake up sometime in late October and start looking at the newspaper, wondering, gee, where are all these judges? We want to vote for judge, and who are we supposed to vote for? And all the races are gone, except, of course, in the 12th Sub-Circuit. So you're going to have 4 races up there. You're going to have some. You can actually have some contests to deal with, but that's basically about it. You don't have much anywhere else. So in that sense, it's a typical election where everything is decided in the Democratic primary, and this year's Democratic primary was a little bit different because the numbers were so huge. I think there was something like 1.3 million people took ballots in the Democratic primary, and the figures I've seen from Dr. Klump, who is very gracious in terms of providing his statistical analysis on this, so there was something like 836,000 on average voted in countywide judicial races. So there's a huge fall off from president down all the way to judge, something like 500,000 votes, but still 836,000. He says that's the largest in recent memory. So that's pretty amazing right there. And what happens when you have that many people coming out to vote? Your standard issue machine voter is a little bit overwhelmed, and so we only had 4 out of the 8 slated candidates countywide who were in contested races actually get elected. Now, one of the things some of the comments on the blog were, well, that's the last time we let anybody go uncontested, because there were a number of slated candidates who were uncontested. I would point out that, in 2018, when we do this all over again, will be a gubernatorial election year. There may be a big primary turnout, but I don't think there will be anywhere near.
No, not like President. President brings them out of the woodwork. As much as people love and hate Rauner, and it's not going to bring out the same turnout that this will. It was also interesting to me what the increasing percentage of Republican primary voters in places like the 50th Ward here, other wards in the city, along the outskirts of the city, as well as in a number of the near north and near northwest suburbs.
But that's a function of the large turnout generally. There was something like 364,000 Republican ballots taken in the county. Now, yes, that's a big number for Republicans in a primary election, but it pales in significance by
no question.
It's not like the county is turning red.
No, not at all. Just to give people an example, in the 50th Ward, 28% of the ballots were Republican, and I'm sure that was to vote in the presidential, and I'm sure a number of those people ordinarily would identify themselves as Democrats. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is that amounted to over 3,000 votes. There were years when the Democrats would put up the Republican committeemen, and they'd want to make sure they had 200 votes, and there were so few people voting Republican then that the local Democratic powers that be had to recruit their own people to register Republican in order to make sure that their Republican nominee got in there, and that's very important because that's judges on Election Day.
Really, even 2 years ago, there were stories about people who, this time you're the Republican this time.
Yeah.
And not so much in this primary, not at all.
No problem along those lines whatsoever. And it was the same 4 years ago. It was not that dissimilar, where you had an increasingly larger number of people voting Republican in these areas because they felt that, they feel wrongly that about the importance of the judicial races and how much a judge affects their life, and instead voted presidential because they did very much want to say in that.
Well, you got a lot of people coming out. I mean, the talking heads have some credibility when they say there's voter anger out there, and I think there clearly
is
some dissatisfaction. I'm not sure that it's focused. I'm not sure that it's well directed.
No, it's not focused, and it's not well directed. But that explains Trump and Sanders are both products of that very sort of thing.
Right. They are opposite sides of the same coin.
Yeah, and by the way, I could also argue to a certain extent that Obama was a smaller product of that same sort of thing, because his promises of change without a background or substance resonated with people.
Well, clearly he was the candidate in 8 years ago that was anti-establishment, in the sense that Hillary Clinton, as she is today, is the product of the powers that be. I don't know, but that's outside my wheelhouse, and I don't plan to swim in those waters.
Right. So let's get back to your wheelhouse. Let's talk about let's talk about judicial. Now, in the we are going to have something new in the fall, which is actual elections in Cook County that are contested for judge.
Well, I say in 12th Sub-Circuit we will. I mean, for the most part, we will not. In 90% of the county, 95% of the county, the people will come into the polling booth, and they'll have uncontested elections, and they won't even get down to the retention ballot, which is something else we'll have to talk about.
Right. Now, in 12, which is the far north and northwest suburbs of the county, all four races are contested, and it'll be interesting there.
We also have a contested race in 13, which is the far northwest corner, which is Barrington and Palatine.
And right.
And some of those townships out there. So we have some, but it's in the fringe areas, I guess you might say. You know, in the hinterlands, what Mayor Daley used to call the county towns. Only out there that you have any elections.
So let's go back to what you said we'll touch upon later.
I mean, the retention election.
Yeah.
Okay, what about it? I mean, the retention elections are coming up. We're now in mid-April. The final word has to go out, and Mr. Nally, sitting out in the audience today, will know the exact dates by which, you know, the judges who are up for retention must notify of their intent to seek retention. Okay, and then once those notices are turned in, we're going to find out just exactly how many people we've got on the ballot. You know, it's going to be somewhere between 50 and 70. It's going to be a lot of people, and there's going to be a lot of need to you know, find out who these people are and how they have performed in office. Now, remember, if you're running for retention, you've been in office at least 6 years. You're retained every 6 years. So we're talking about people who were first elected now in 2016. These are people who were first elected in 2010 or 2004 or 1998 and going back. And the way they're listed on the ballot, I don't know who the oldest of the retention judges will be, but, you know,
I can take a guess at one of them.
Well, you know, I don't want
Bob Gordon.
Okay, except that wait a minute, does he sit by assignment? Yeah, I guess he does. So yeah, it may be.
Because I talked to him. I wanted him on the show, and he's very big on ethics. And he was saying that he didn't think ethically he could come on until a certain period. You know, until
prior to the retention election.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. That makes sense.
And I'd vote for him several times, by the way.
Sorry, Gordon, if you're watching. Avi Meyer's opinions are his own.
Oh, by the way, Kim Fox said leave me alone about that unless I challenged her. Oh, I did.
All right. So, yeah, so we're going to have that, and we'll have the retention election coming up, and we're going to have the bar associations are going to be doing their evaluations. And, of course, we do have some lawyers who watch this, and we want to make sure that people who have thought about applying for their judicial evaluation committees, and these are, you know, directed to the lawyers, they really should consider doing it. The Chicago Bar Association made a special pitch on the blog recently, not because they're hurting in numbers so much, but because they want to diversify and grow their things. And frankly, that's a discussion worth having. You know, is the evaluation process representative of the actual opinions of the bar? Are judicial candidates and sitting judges who are up for retention being evaluated by a sufficiently representative segment of the bar? And so the more people that involve themselves in that process, the better off I think the process will be. So that's important.
Definitely. And one thing, you know, I'm really glad you brought this up. I wouldn't have thought to bring this up here, but it's important. When my judicial panel sits down, they'll knock out any candidate who refused to appear before a bar association. You know, the feeling is they're ducking, even if it's just, if they did them all except the Chicago Bar Association, they're automatically ruled off. So if you think that you're having your opponent duck is going to get them elected, it almost never will.
And as long as the evaluation process is perceived as it should be perceived, as fair and reasonably objective, and one of the ways we can do that is by getting as many people involved in the process as possible. A lot of people criticize the evaluation process, but the question is, come up with a better alternative then.
Right. Well, we're running out of time. If we're going to have any Marty Levinsons at all, Jack Leyhane, judicial blogger, for what it's worth, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to my entire technical crew, Senny Hirsch. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Join us again next week. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you very much, Avi.